Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the IWillAim Podcast. Our topic for today is Fueling Dreams Beyond Earth, Funding Non-Commercial Space Mission with Sara Pousho. What would you learn today? You learn how Sara is leveling the playing field for other people to gain access to space mission. What an exciting topic. Sara, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Will. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Sara Pousho. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Space Bridge Partners, and we founded it. We came out of stealth mode just over a year ago. So I'm excited to be here and talk to you about it and talk to you more about my career history.
Thank you. Let's start with the first question. What inspired you to found Space Bridge Partner, and how did your career path led you to focus on funding non-commercial space mission?
Well, I have a very roundabout way of getting. I had a very roundabout way of getting to where I am today. I've always been interested in space since I was a little girl, and I wanted to be an astronaut. When I was growing up, that was my goal. So I started out in elementary school and middle school and high school. All of my school papers would be about off-world habitats and different space topics. My goal was to go to university and graduate with an astronomy degree and then go get my pilot's license and then go work for NASA. Well, I ended up going in as an astronomy major, but graduating university as a rhetoric major. So couldn't really get a job at NASA back in 1990 when I graduated. So I got a temp job that led me to working at that same company for 5 years, which led me to another job and another job in consumer products. So most of my career history, I've been working with kids products, books, toys, games, consumer electronics, and I've headed up sales teams and sold to all the major chain stores in North America and Europe and a little bit in Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. And then also heading up licensing teams. So I was negotiating global licensing agreements with players like Disney and Warner Brothers and Hasbro. So those kind of negotiation skills were pretty important for a company like Space Bridge Partners. Well, one of my best friends that I met at university is one of the co-founders of Space Bridge Partners. His name's Guillermo Sunline, and the idea for Space Bridge Partners actually came from him. He's a serial entrepreneur who's been in the space sector for over 25 years and started a company that had a goal to send humans to Venus. And that's the name of his
Whoa,
company,
really?
Humans to Venus. And he shopped it around with different launch partners and spacecraft makers and manufacturers. And they all said, "This is an amazing idea. How much money have you raised?" And he said, "Well, none. I was hoping we could partner on this and get up there together." And they said, "Come back when you have money." So he did some research and realized that there are tons of missions that are focused on science and exploration and education, going to space, that rely on government funding or grants, but that's never usually enough to cover the whole cost of the mission. So he decided to start the company and did not have the bandwidth. So I stepped in as CEO a little over a year and a half ago, and we've taken it from there. So that's how I arrived at this, is staying in touch with one of my best friends and my passion for space, and it all kind of came together.
Wow, your story is very interesting because you started with wanting to be an astronaut, doing other stuff, and then coming back around. Like you said, in a roundabout way, you're back. And I think it's a very interesting and powerful story that if you want something, at some point you'll find a way to actually get there, and you are there. You're the CEO of the company. So really, congratulations. Really excited learning more about your journey. Next
Thank
question I
you.
had, in everything we do in life, there's always that one biggest challenge. What's that one biggest challenge for non-commercial space mission in securing funding, and how does Space Bridge Partner address that challenge?
Well, the biggest challenge, I think, when we talk about non commercial, the missions that we're supporting are from nonprofits. They're organized by
Yeah.
nonprofits, they're organized by universities, they're organized by small civil space agencies that don't have a NASA budget. Those are the kinds of missions that we're trying to support. And they have a hard time getting funding because usually the grant funding or the government funding they get is not enough for the whole cost of the mission, but also because as you said, they're non-commercial missions, meaning there's not an ROI in most cases,
Yeah.
but they're studying really important science and conducting really important experiments that could not only teach us more about our solar system, but could eventually lead to technology that we're using here on planet Earth. So that's why we have this mission to support them. There's so much yet to be discovered about our solar system and help us learn more about Earth and help us develop new technologies that we can use on Earth and also off planet. So that's the biggest challenge that these mission organizers have is A, getting enough funding, and B, the bandwidth to really find the time to fundraise and how to fundraise. So we do that for them. Once we've thoroughly vetted them to make sure that they have a reasonable scientific or a mission objective, they have the right team, they have the right timeline, they have the right budget put together, we'll go out and try to raise funding mostly from 3 different verticals. One is through pure philanthropic donations from wealthy people. The second vertical is by helping mission organizers negotiate a brand sponsorship. So those active marketing activation dollars can be used towards the cost of the mission. And the third is through media partners. We help the mission organizers negotiate licensing agreements. So if a media partner wanted to create a documentary, they could pay royalties to guarantee their exclusivity and access to the team, et cetera. And those royalties could be used towards the cost of the mission. So that's our main business plan.
Well, thank you for sharing the approach and the 3 ways of funding. I want to ask a follow-up question related to this. When you're talking to those companies or organization or schools, how are you organizing it? If they have the similar mission and similar goal, are they getting partner up and their work are bundled together in the same mission, or how does that work?
No, we have so far we have about a dozen missions on our timeline. There's a few that have the same destination, but they're doing completely different science.
Oh,
So the only way that they might be potentially, as you put it, bundled together is if they shared the same rocket launch.
ah,
So there might be multiple experiments on one rocket launch, and if the trajectory of that launch is pointing at the right planet or pointing at the right point in space or the right orbit around Earth, then they could potentially accidentally be on the same rocket flight. But mostly these experiments, because the mission organizers and the chief scientists for all these missions have different scientific objectives, they don't usually work together. They're working on their own projects. So where we see parallels, we'll connect the dots. But right now, all of the missions in our pipeline have very different objectives and don't overlap.
that's interesting to know, and perhaps their timeline are very different too, right? So that's why they
Correct.
probably won't end up in the same place. I want to kind of ask a little bit more question about the capital funding. Can you explain how your vision and how private capital brand and sponsorship, we mentioned about sponsorship and media, can transform the space exploration and scientific mission?
Sure. I think one of the first things that people ask when I first introduce them to SpaceBridge Partners and what we're all about is, it sounds like we might be a VC, a venture capital firm, which we are not. We're raising funds for space missions, not for space companies. So that's the first thing that I wanted to clarify. So what that means is, when it comes to private equity, or I should say private capital, this is really more of a philanthropic donation from a wealthy person. And so they can get the tax write-off as one advantage, but mostly they're just in it. These are people that we're looking for that are interested in helping space innovation move forward and helping get these key scientific missions off the ground. They all have legacy making objectives, which one of them could literally change the way we think of life itself. We've always thought that we needed water to have biologic life, and it looks like we might not. So that's one of our missions.
Wow.
Another mission that we're working on is trying to figure out if humans can reproduce in less than 1 g of gravity like we have here on Earth. And we're going to need to know that if we're sending people to the moon or to Mars to establish bases there. And a great side effect of, if you will, of this mission is that the chief scientist has developed technology that can actually help increase the success rate of in vitro fertilization here on Earth. So even though our missions don't have a commercial return right off the bat, if you're a philanthropic donor, you could have first dibs on being able to invest in that technology if it's developed from one of our scientific missions. B, you have the luxury of knowing that you've helped be a part of this innovation in the space sector that's growing exponentially, especially under the new US administration. And C, you could get some perks, which vary depending on what mission you choose to support. But we can set up VIP packages to the launches. You could have some of the mission team speak at your company. We could introduce you to some astronauts. There's a lot of different perks that you can get. Simply knowing that your name is tied to some of these legacy missions is probably the best return on your investment, aside from the tax write-off.
I do agree about the tax write-off. It's great for you to have your name part of something that has impact in the generations to come, right? I think these are
Mm-hmm.
work that have like impact in the subsequent generation, and to say that you have contributed to that cause is amazing. And it's to
Yes.
knowing that your organization is like the catalyst for making that happen. Wow, it blows my mind. Like it's like the ultimate like superhero type experience. Anyway, let's talk about what type of organization or individual make ideal partner for SpaceBridge, and how do you approach building that relationship? Because that's crucial, building relationship.
Well, if you know me, you know that relationship building is one of my superpowers and being able to network and connect the dots. So that's the key behind SpaceBridge Partners' success, current and future success, is being able to build out that network of funders. So the key partners that we're looking for are people that are either already space enthusiasts and already support that community, or people that are curious about it and want to see how they can participate in the space sector. So especially if you have access to some funds that and you can help support our missions, which need anywhere from $1 million to $1 billion, as I mentioned, that's one area. And then putting together these brand sponsorships is key. In the way that we do it is really curating those connections. So we don't just say, hey everybody, we got a bunch of missions, anyone want to help fund us? We're conscious of what each mission's objective is and partnering them with the right people. So if you're a high net worth individual and you're interested in maybe your money comes from oil and gas drilling here in the United States or anywhere in the world for that matter, maybe we have a mission in our pipeline that has to do with mining of an asteroid or the moon or Mars. They might be interested in supporting that kind of a mission because it aligns with their current portfolio. The same reason with the mission I was telling you about, that's the side effect is, or a happy offshoot of it is helping in vitro fertilization. Maybe you work for a women's pharma company, or you represent Pampers or Huggies. Like that would be a great tie-in. So we're trying to be very conscious of the relationships that we put together to support each mission and make sure that there's brand alignment there on both ends. The mission organizer thinks it makes sense, and their supporters are coming to the brand, so the brand's potentially getting some new fans, and obviously the mission supports what the brand messaging is about. And on the media company side, it's pretty simple. Like as I mentioned, a lot of our missions are legacy making missions, so really like a documentary would be amazing, following it through from concept to fruition, especially if there's some of these big discoveries that we think are going to happen on these missions. So huge editorial authority for the mission organizers and a great message to send for the documentarian.
Well, in that particular regard, you might have your Space Bridge TV, your own
I
TV
hope so.
channel,
That would be
right?
amazing.
Every mission is a particular episode. It's going to be on
Yeah.
Netflix.
Yeah, that'd be great.
There you
You
go.
said it first.
Let's go to the next question. Why are non-commercial space missions so critical to the future of space exploration? And what's unique about the contribution they make compared to commercial venture?
Well, I said a little bit of this before, but I think it's really key for us to learn as much as we can about traveling off planet, living off planet, discovering more about the makeup of our solar system. You know, what does Venus look like? What minerals are available on Mars? We know a lot of this, but we've never actually literally set foot on these places yet. We can't actually set foot on Venus, but we could conceivably exist in the atmosphere around Venus, where the conditions are actually surprisingly similar to Earth's, about 60 kilometers above the surface. But the more we learn about these other places in our solar system, the more we can learn about Earth. And the technology developed in these missions and to conduct these missions for these missions could also be used on Earth. So, great examples of those dating back to the Apollo days. We wouldn't have GPS
Hmm.
without the Apollo missions. We wouldn't have hook and loop fasteners, brand name Velcro without the Apollo missions. We wouldn't have things like hand sanitizer where, you could use that. You don't need to run a sink with soap and water. You can use hand sanitizer, things that have to be utilized in zero gravity or low gravity conditions. So originally, these scientific missions don't have a commercial ROI, but A, they could evolve into having one, but B, they could definitely help improve life on planet Earth because it's technology being developed for use in space. So that's why it's so important. And right now, on some of these missions, we just don't know what we don't know. And we make some incredible
Yes.
discoveries that come out of this that can help us further our footprint in the solar system and help longevity here on planet Earth as well.
It's really interesting the things that you mentioned, the innovation that came out of space mission that I wasn't aware of until you mentioned it. I was like, really? Wow, hand sanitizer that came out of that? Like, whoa, blow my mind. That's really, really interesting to know. And that's why I also love to do podcasts like this because then I get to learn a lot. I think there's a concept of space outsider, and in the ecosystem. Can you elaborate of what it means and how a newcomer could get involved in the space industry? And what's meant by space outsider?
Well, outsider has a little bit of a negative connotation, but I think
I
the
know.
idea behind that really is people think that you have to be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk to be able to be in the space sector or work for SpaceX or something like that, or you have to be an engineer and make satellites. And that is true. That's an easy way to get into the sector. But it's not the only story. Virtually every job that exists on planet Earth today is needed for the space sector. And that's everything. Like, think about a chef putting together food that can be made and served and put together off planet or in microgravity situations. Interior designers. What does a living habitat look like off of planet? What does even a space capsule look like? How do we make it more comfortable and more easily accessible for astronauts to reach all the buttons that they need to, but be sitting, especially if they're going to go to Mars, be in a confined space for months at a time before they get to their destination. So architects, interior designers, if we're going to have people living off planet, what does the legal system look like? What does the education system look like? So we're
Wow.
talking about teachers and lawyers and law enforcement and all these different. So thinking forward to that, that's the exciting part of this. So there's a lot of different ways. Even artists, I know fashion designers that are involved in the space sector. I mean, look at the launch that Prada just had with the new suit for Axiom. So there's tons of ways that you can get involved if you're enthusiastic about being a part of the space sector. And then I think the second part of your question was how can you start
Yes.
joining in? And I would recommend, I have not been in this industry for very long. I spent most of my career in consumer products. So the way I did it is, especially if you're a little bit more of an extrovert, but even if you're an introvert, look for conferences in your area. I mean, if I had enough money, I would go to every conference I could, and there's a space conference somewhere in the world every week. So
Oh,
start going
wow.
to
I
those.
didn't know that.
Some are free, some are very expensive, some are in between. But start attending those conferences, reach out to your network. You'd be surprised how many people, if they're not already in the space sector, know somebody that is. So definitely use your network. I use LinkedIn a lot to connect people to each other and to find new people to connect with. And yeah, just start pursuing your passion that way. And that conversations and talking to people will lead you to something eventually in the space sector. But there's tons of free and very inexpensive ways to get involved. There's online groups, there's groups and there's subreddits if you're on in Reddit and Facebook and,
Yeah.
and LinkedIn.
Wow. Okay.
So there's all kinds of different ways to start getting connected if you're interested.
Well, first of all, thank you for clarifying the notion of space outsider and also sharing how might we, like me, attend a space conference. So I might actually look into that one. Based on what you do right now in your role, what is your vision for the future of non-commercial space mission, and what does Space Bridge Partner look into shaping what the next decade looks like?
Well, I don't want to give away too many company secrets, but I can tell you
No secret sauce. High level. High level.
high level. Yeah. One thing, I mean, we would love to never have a scientific or explorative mission go unfunded. And that's on a global level. We currently have missions in our pipeline from other countries, just FYI. So we want to be kind of the go-to place. If you're an educational institution, if you're a nonprofit, if you're an underserved community, we want to be your go-to place to find the funding that you need to literally get your project off the ground. So 10 years from now, I'd love for there to be more than one SpaceBridge partners to make sure that all these missions get the funding that they need, ideally. And then hopefully by then too, we'll be, well, not hopefully, we definitely will be generating enough revenue to where we can actually give back to the space sector. So if there is a remote country that has a university or a group of scientists that want to do a climate study and there's not currently a satellite that is orbiting over their country, maybe we can offer them the funding that they need to get their satellite onto a rocket launch somewhere. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. And then personally, on my personal mission is being a female that's super interested. Science was always my favorite subject growing up. I want to encourage other girls and women to get into STEM fields, especially into the space sector, which is still dominated by males. I'd love to help support those causes too, and just get more kids involved in showing them. I mean, here's a crazy fact. The first person to live on Mars has probably already been born. So how do I get those people, more and more of those people, to get excited about space and get excited about being in a STEM field or especially the space sector? So I want to support those efforts as well.
It's mind blowing what your vision is. And the part that I'm really inspired of is you being a role model for a lot of young women to think about taking that step. And it's great to have you do what you do, because they could reach out and have a conversation with you, right? Sometimes it's great to be able to talk to someone who have been there doing that. So thank you for doing that. You're inspiring next generation of space entrepreneur in many ways, right? Or also space research. I love the fact that your vision includes that I would call the great equalizer, right? Like places or school who didn't have funding or access, but Space Bridge, could then enable them or empower them to
Mm-hmm.
have that opportunity, which otherwise they won't have. And to me, that's really very inspiring, because that's just like the thing that we need more in this world now, to have people who are talented and capable have some sort of equal access to do something and get their thoughts and experiment out there. So thank you for doing that. It's amazing. I'm imagining already there's a space bridge community somewhere. Every country have a space bridge community that's headed by
That's the
you,
goal.
and you're like, yeah, you create like satellite of space bridge, and you actually help different countries, different organizations, schools, or small business that really wants to do that experiment get their vision to fruition,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think so
That's the ultimate
inspiring.
goal. Yeah.
I'm so inspired with what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm so glad I'm doing this podcast. Let me put it that way. Now, reflecting on your career, which I know is fairly successful and is now fairly even more inspiring, what do you consider are the three factors behind your success, and why? Because I want my
Well,
audience to learn that.
I mentioned one earlier is leaning into your superpowers, and one of
Yes.
mine happens to be relationship building and networking. I remember when my high school friend or my university friend, my co-founder Guillermo, when he and I first started talking about me transitioning into the space sector, uh, he recommended some conferences for me to go to, and I just started meeting people. Pretty soon, I was introducing him to some key figures in the space sector that he did not know. And so that's when I knew, like, okay, this is definitely where I belong. And now I know I've arrived because I've introduced this guy who's been in the industry for many, many years to somebody that he didn't know. So leaning into your network is really important. Two, I think, is being able to ask for help. That's one thing I've learned is you have to change your mindset. People are too embarrassed to ask for help, or they think no one's going to want to help them. Yet if somebody asks you for help, most people would say, well, sure, I would love to help you. So it's a funny oxymoron there that you're too scared to ask for help, but if somebody asks for you, you'd be more than happy to do that. So I think two, asking for help when I needed it got me here. And I think a perfect example of that is that when I knew I really wanted to get to where my heart was in, transition from consumer products into the space sector, I hired a coach, a life coach, who helped me really identify what my strongest skills were. Before I met her, I was looking for jobs that were completely different positions in all kinds of different industries. Even though I knew I wanted to be in the space sector, I just told myself I couldn't because I didn't have any experience. And she helped me realize you don't need the experience. And she also helped me realize I should be looking at CEO positions because that's what my skill set led me to. And I just was selling myself short. So having that sort of, again, asking for help, getting an outside, whether it's a coach, whether it's asking your friends, whether it's asking for friends and family financial help, there's many different ways that you can ask for help and get it, and that'll help you get to your next level. So the networking, asking for help, and I think the third thing too is just don't sell yourself short. Everybody has a skill, everybody has a passion. Lean into that. Pat yourself on the back for that. Be confident in the skills that you do have to offer, because everybody can use what you're working on, which also kind of harkens back to what I was talking about. Whether you're a chef or an architect or a interior designer, we need you in the space sector right now. So even if you don't think you can, maybe look at shifting your paradigm a little bit, because I bet your beliefs are limiting you.
When you said about asking for help, it's like a light bulb, right? Flash. And I said to myself, that's really true. A lot of people are afraid to ask for help, especially when you're further in your career. There seems to be this notion somewhere that says, telling people you don't know that is not a good thing. And I love that you said that in this particular episode. You said that it's okay to ask for help. And it's a great notion to the last part that said, you need to like value yourself. And in fact, I just did a webinar on my book, Seed Up Leadership. And that's one of my key topic is value yourself, right? Like
Mhm.
John Maxwell said, if you don't value yourself, no one will. No one. If you tell
Right.
people I'm not good at it, they're like, okay, I get it. You're not good at it because you said so, right? But if you're
Right.
truly good, like it's great for you to actually say that, because as a CEO of a company, people could watch this episode and say, a CEO said you need to value yourself. A CEO said you need to ask for help. That's perfectly fine. And it's really great to actually have this like three things that you share that really would really help a lot of people when they listen. So now I want to go before we close the episode. I want to talk about the three takeaway. Can you pinpoint the three takeaway for today's episode that you want people to remember?
Sure. One of them is related to what we were just talking about, but in terms kind of related to the asking for help part. If you're starting a company, or even if you're working just on a team within a company, understand you need to value your strengths, but you also need to understand where your weaknesses are and put people around you that can complement those weaknesses. So if like I really understand consumer products, I understand how to talk to people. I have a lot of strengths when it comes to that, looking at financial reports. I do not have the strength as a marketing person. So I will want to bring in a marketing person that can complement those strengths. I want to work with people that have different experience than me. So what are some of the different ways you're going to be most successful if you can understand and realize where your weaknesses are and bring in those people and then trust those people to support you, because a rising tide raises all boats. So I'm a firm believer in that. The second thing I think is the very fact of don't be afraid to ask for help. That should be a big takeaway for you. And then the third thing I think is, if you're thinking about making a big change, or you see a big change ahead, whether it's a divorce or empty nest, or you want to change your career or big life changes like that, um, relying on your inner strength, but also being able to ask for that help, like having a coach, having an objective third party help you through that transition, will help speed it up, but also help you focus on where you need to focus to get over that hump. So whether it's for me, realizing my strengths and realizing that I should be looking at more leadership positions, and CEO in particular, helped me not sell myself short when I made that change, but also made me realize what my strengths and weaknesses were, and figure out how I could put together the best team to make the company a success. So those are the three things. Kind of a roundabout answer, but those are the three main things.
Well, they're really impressive ones, right? I think the way you explain, like if I'm not good at marketing, I got find someone who's really good in marketing, and now not try to experiment on it, and that
Right.
gives that notion that you're also great as a leader because you're also humble. You know that it's the right moment to bring in the right people, so you're like the spoke in the wheel, and all the people surrounding you are the one that helping you and your team to be successful in the long run. So thank you for
Well, the
sharing the three
spokes go the
takeaways.
spokes go both ways, William.
Yes.
Don't forget it. So
Wow.
like
Okay. Yep.
they're
True. True.
supporting me,
True.
but I try to support them too.
I think I love that aspect of it because oftentimes people think it's about one way, it's bi-directional. So thank you for pointing that out. Before we end today's episode, I want to give you some time to share what's the best way to connect with Sarah and what are the current, events or conference that you're going to or you're going to speak at.
The best way to reach me if you don't know me already is through LinkedIn. I'm looking at LinkedIn all the time and looking at people who reach out to me that way. So feel free to connect there. I am speaking at a couple of different events. I'll be speaking at a New Space Berkeley event in April. Next week, I'll be at an AIAA event. It's a Aeronautical Society event here in San Francisco. I'll be speaking at an event next Thursday. But I'm always, again, I post that on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach me, check out my LinkedIn. You can also reach me at sarah@spacebridgepartners.com. That's my email. But yeah, keep an eye out for me and check my LinkedIn feeds, and you'll see where I have some speaking engagements coming up.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for your time. I really appreciate you gifting me this opportunity and also gifting my community to learn more about space mission. Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate you.
Likewise, thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome.